so anxious.
Oh my, I mean,
Linda was looking pretty anxious too, but
Linda, I don't think had a bite of her meal.
no,
I don't think she had one.
when she's anxious, she doesn't eat. Just let her.
And is the ultimate, the final day for you is
June 30th.
After June. Okay.
Right. So. realized. I think it was the spur.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Just give it stay at the mic.
I never would have guessed.
Mic doesn't seem to be working, so we'll just go like this. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Calvin Trillin, for an amazing keynote address. Now we're lucky enough to have an exit interview with President Levin, who will be stepping down in June after 20 years of running the university. He's being interviewed by two former editor-in-chiefs, one from the beginning of his term and one from the end of his term, Paul Needham and Emily Nelson. And without further ado, three of you, please.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you for being with us this
Great.
afternoon.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here.
We're going to use this as a chance to look back, look forward, and then we'll also open it up to questions from everyone at the end. So to start off, Yale presents so differently today from when you took office. It was amid just a host of challenges. And so looking back on that, how did you define what you were going to tackle first, set the priorities, and kind of put us on the track?
Well, thanks. Well, if you go back and read what I said on the day I was announced as the president in April of 1993, or in my inaugural address, I actually had a pretty coherent program that I've spent about 20 years executing, and the components were more or less repair the relationships with the city of New Haven and transform Yale from a ivory tower to a model corporate citizen, to do something to repair the condition of the buildings, which were in terrible state of dilapidation, to rebalance Yale's intellectual portfolio in the direction of science, not to say that we would deprive the humanities and the arts, which have long been a strength, but to bring science up so that we would be more competitive with our peer institutions in that domain, and to internationalize the university. And then there was also some material about expanding access to the great treasures of Yale by expanding financial aid. That was essentially the program, and actually, that's exactly what I've been doing for 20 years. So, but it was clear what had to be done first. We were running a budget deficit. The facilities were in terrible condition. We actually couldn't afford at that moment to really start heavily investing in the facilities, so we went into a planning mode, and for about the first 2.5 years, there was a systematic effort to organize the campus into various components. The arts area was one, the residential college is another, the athletic facilities another, the libraries were another, the medical complex, and we basically developed capital plans for the entire campus in the course of the first 2 or 3 years when we didn't yet have the resources to do very much about it. And then, of course, the market kept going up and up in the 90s, and we were able to begin to invest by the mid to late 90s. The thing that we started in right away as the first priority was New Haven, and because it seemed to me that we really needed to signal a wholehearted commitment to sort of improving conditions in the city. It was really, Yale was really being penalized in admissions results and in our national reputation by what was then a very high crime rate in the city, and by the sense that this was a kind of demoralized community. And in fact, the reality was in the early 90s, there were many vacant storefronts in the downtown. There had just been a New Yorker article, Bill Finnegan, who then went on and wrote a book about teenage gangs. That book could have been written about any city in America, but it was written about New Haven and written about essentially the Dwight neighborhood, which is immediately adjacent to campus. So that was a problem. GQ published an article right after I took office, basically saying that Yale was called the death of Yale. And so we really needed to address, both for the external audience, but more fundamentally to really sort of change conditions in New Haven. So we started right away with a whole series of initiatives in the first year. The most important initiative was hiring Linda Lorimer to do this, and we took it quite a distance in the first couple of years, and then realized the next job was real estate development, developed the downtown, and I brought in Bruce Alexander, who did a magnificent job of that.
So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about Linda Lorimer. We're going to talk about Bruce Alexander.
Good.
But let's talk about you also, which was Emily's question was, how does the campus present differently? And how do you think you present differently? How do you think you've changed in 20 years?
I've become a much better speaker. I was terrible. I mean, it's embarrassing to go back and look at the early years. I fidgeted way too much. I bounced on my toes. Video's great. It helps you learn. So I got better. I got more relaxed. I realized I didn't have to orate. I could just talk, in a normal tone of voice. I think it was much more, for me, much more effective style. So I think I think I always dressed up okay. But
What about as a manager?
I had pretty good instincts for that all through my life, actually. I mean, I sort of was president of everything, growing up like a lot of Yale kids and like a lot of people. And so I think I had pretty good instincts. I had been chair of the economics department and understood that academic management required quite a lot of psychological savvy. It's not just organizational skills. You have to really understand people. And particularly when you're managing a department, it's a very challenging thing to do because you got these incredibly talented people. It's probably like, journalism must be similar, try to organize a group of really talented people who get where they are because they're individualistic. And because they're excellent at what they do, but not because they're necessarily team players. And so, learning how to, I got very good experience being a department chair in learning how to bring people together with disparate points of view, who didn't sort of instinctively care about the community. They cared more about their individual well-being. And so being able to bring people together was something I think I'd probably developed best as a department chair.
And why retire now? Why did this feel like the right time?
Well, 20 years is a good round number. It's a slightly a joke, but it's sort of serious too. I tried to think about what would it be like. We had a big gala celebration in 2003 at my 10th anniversary as president. And I thought, so what happens in April? I was thinking last summer, what happens in April when it's my 20th anniversary? And if I haven't announced I'm leaving, that's the only thing people are going to be thinking about, like how much longer is he going to be here? So there was a kind of natural rhythm, it seemed. It also seemed like, in terms of the cycle of accomplishing things, that a number of, we just finished a big capital campaign. You run these things sort of, you should be launching the next campaign, beginning to at least plan it no more than 5 years after the previous one. And if you're going to go into another campaign cycle, that means another 7 years. And I wasn't going to hold this job till I was 75. That was clear. So I thought that was a natural reason. We had some big things had been completed in terms of launching the Singapore campus, which I felt now was in good hands. We had a fabulous leader out there, and it was great momentum. And I thought, it's probably as good a time as there will be to pass the baton. There are also, the major goals of internationalizing the university and repairing New Haven and kind of improving science, they were all sort of well underway. And it seemed like the next era was going to be, how will Yale cope with the online revolution? That it seemed like there was another big project out there that probably required a 10-year perspective to really do a good job with it. And I really believe you want to finish things you start, or at least get far along the road. And so that's another reason. So all in all, it just added up. And I sort of gradually came to this realization over the course of the summer and announced on the 30th of August.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
The first, which someone just, you've said before that President Eliot from Harvard is your hero and your role model. He served 40 years. Do you think the era in which anyone could lead almost any organization for 40 years is over?
Not necessarily. I mean, if I'd started this job at 35, like Eliot did, I would have gone. I'm 65 now. I would have gone 30. I think very likely. It's just. But you have to love it, though. I mean, there are very few of my colleagues who really love this job. this kind of job. I mean, they know it's important, they're dedicated, they're really committed. I mean, most of the university presidents that I know are fabulously great people, but they find, most people find it wears them down over time. That was never my problem. I sort of somehow, for whatever reason, I thrived in it. Emotionally, I like the job, I like doing it.
You've said online education is maybe the biggest challenge facing Peter Salve. Do you think you relate to that question? Do you think you could have started that process and Yale could have taken that more seriously sooner?
We did. We were earlier in this than anybody. Just in the
not at scale, though.
No, not at scale. But in the internet bubble, before the internet bubble burst, we started All Learn. We were in there with Stanford and Oxford in this with this online experiment. We did the Open Yale courses right on the heels of the MIT OpenCourseWare. But all they were doing at that point was putting reading lists up and problem sets, and we put on live video, really excellent video of full lecture courses, and had them transcribed and translated, and so I think we were definitely in the game. The last little, what John Hennessy calls the tsunami, it came on in a rush. I mean, in my view, a kind of premature, inchoate rush. So Coursera and Udacity and edX get founded within the span of 6 months. And people start signing up. And look at it, it's already, the game has changed. Stanford announced it's joining edX now. They were the ones that started Coursera, backed off from being the principal investor in it. Now they're joining edX. I was a student of technological change and how industries evolve. That was my subject in economics. We're just at the beginning of something that's going to be workable at scale, or that's going to have a revenue model to sustain it. And there's going to be, it isn't going to look like what it looks like now. And MOOCs may not be, that is to say, the very large courses, that may not turn out to be the best way to do this. To really get education out of it as opposed to just exposure to content, you really have to figure out ways to evaluate students, to certify them. That may take more human input than the current model allows. So I think it's a great problem. I think it's exciting. I think Yale should be in it, and we are working on multiple platforms. We actually taught 9 summer school courses last summer, completely online, with grades, with mentoring, with professors, online with the students, and we charge $3,000 a course. Not the $50 that these massive courses are talking about. So, there are going to be different ways to cope with it. There are a whole bunch of different levels and models that will work, and it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun for Yale to explore it.
Is there anyone who you're looking at and thinking, oh, they're doing it well as you look at that?
I like the Coursera people. I think they're impressive, Andrew and Daphne, and they're they're visionary and they're enthusiastic. They've got the right entrepreneurial spirit, and I think the brains and the flexibility. The thing I've admired about them is they have changed their story in about every 2 months because they learn things, and they're not embarrassed. They're not stuck with an idea. They're nimble, and I would not be surprised if they're survivors in this game, but I think the model will evolve. And I also thought Yale didn't have to hurry to sign up for one of these. We have a great brand, and we didn't have to be first in the gate. It would have cost $30 million to join edX a year ago. It costs $0 to join edX now.
Hitting on another theme that you've discussed, which is the globalization, and you talk about that you're putting out, educated global citizens. What do you mean by that expression? What's sort of the Yale student you want to send off?
So, I pursued this very, right from the beginning. The first move was to try to expand the number of international students in Yale College, and then later, when we were in better economic circumstances, we went to need-blind admissions of international students and a real concerted effort to get every Yale student overseas. And the impetus behind it educationally starts from a recognition that we live in a globally connected world, that to be an effective and functioning person in almost any walk of life, certainly in journalism, in business, in education, the professions a little less so yet, but it's going to happen. you're going to need the ability to relate to people with different cultural backgrounds who see the world in a different way from oneself. And so I sort of thought early on that we need to think about how do we develop in students a capacity for cross-cultural understanding. And just having roommates, suite mates from overseas is a start. Just having more exposure to foreign students. Well, some of you went here at a time when literally only 2% of the class was international, 1 in 50. And when I started, it was 3%. It's very different when it's 10%. I mean, because everyone now who goes to Yale College today has among their best friends an international student. And so I think that's a start. And then, of course, immersion in a foreign country, spending time there, ideally with the language, really helps you understand that people see the world differently. The assumptions people make about the way the world works differ. And if you're going to end up in partnership with these folks, and educational partnerships, and business partnerships, and legal dealings, whatever it is, you're going to really be advantaged if you have had that experience in a deep way, at least once. Because once you've had it and you understand, oh, I get it. When I'm saying X, that person is thinking Y because they think about the world in a different way. Once you've mastered that capacity, I really think you can apply it in multiple contexts. And I think that's to be a good citizen in the century, an effective person in the century, you're going to need that skill. The citizen part goes a little farther, and that's more rooted in a notion that Yale has always tried to educate people for service to society and for leadership in society. And I think we just have to recognize in this highly interdependent world, the nation is an increasingly artificial construct, that so many of the problems of the world, so many of the dealings that one will have in the world, we're going to cut across international boundaries and jurisdictions. And the obvious problem, the common goods problems like global warming, require global cooperation. And so we always talked about, Yale being a citizen of the nation, but I think you have to think about being a citizen of the nation and a citizen of the planet in this era.
So obviously your desire with the Singapore project is to head down that road and to address that question of how does Yale fit into the world. My question on that is, you've said before that Harvard is like Hertz and Yale is like Avis, and that we have to try harder. Explain from a strategic standpoint, how does the Singapore project fit into your overall sense of Yale's place in the world?
Yeah. So the Singapore project was a natural next step, having basically established this notion that Yale students go overseas. The other piece that students come here, our curriculum here at home has been much strengthened in the international dimension. We were looking at this of the expansion of the faculty in the decade before the bubble, for the financial crisis. Essentially, all of the increment in the size of the faculty was in two categories: in diversity and in internationalization. A little bit in engineering too, so that was accomplished, and it did seem the next step was really to think, can we really think about making a significant improvement in the quality of 21st century education by really serious curricular innovation where you think, okay, we're going to start from scratch and think about what does a 21st century global citizen need to know and how should they be educated. We had a curriculum reform and started at the Tercentennial, 2001, completed in 2003, a committee chaired by Dick Broadhead, who's as good an educator as you can find in America.
And a committee which you told me a few years ago you didn't think had to happen at the beginning.
At the beginning.
Right.
I didn't think it had to happen at the beginning because, and I think in the end I agree that it didn't have to happen because it didn't do very much. I mean, if you look at the outcome, there were some modest incremental improvements. And if you stop at the best thing about that committee, like the committee that on which Dick Broadhead, Allison, Richard, and a number of the rest of other people that became university leaders served in the late 80s, early 90s, was that it brought together the rising stars of the faculty and gave them a leadership opportunity. And so that provided That's where so many of the people, Peter Salovey and Andy Hamilton and a whole lot of others got sort of first cut their teeth on university-wide problems. But the actual result was pretty modest in terms of real change in the curriculum. And the reason for that is in a university as established as ours, and frankly as good as ours, it reduces to turf battles. I mean, no department wants its claim on the number of required courses to be reduced. Everybody's thinking a little bit too parochially about how to get this done. And so the change is incremental. And we did, some of it was very good. I mean, some of it was excellent. And I think we have enhanced, for example, the writing programs have really improved over the last decade. But I was thinking more boldly. And so how do you experiment? And starting up is a way to do it. And starting up internationally in partnership with an international institution seemed like exactly the right thing to do, because rather than do it all by ourselves, because in a way because there are two competing organizations that are sort of behind it, you have to confront the fundamental questions. If you all went over with the presumption, it's just going to be a model of what we do here, and we're going to plop it down overseas, which is the NYU model, by the way, and that's not to disparage it. It's a perfectly they're doing a good service, I think, to their own students by having campuses that essentially replicate NYU in 3 or 4 places around the globe. But this is a very much more radical proposition, which was let's just start over and redesign what we should do. And the document just came out this Thursday. A really fabulous report that gives a comprehensive explanation for the new curriculum and the rationale for it. I mean, it starts at the deepest level about what are the elements of a liberal education in the 21st century, both in terms of content, in terms of organization. I mean, it makes the case for a common curriculum that's been made many times, but has only succeeded in a few instances, only survived in a few instances in this country, where at Yale NUS, all students will take 12 of their 32 courses in common, which creates a whole opportunity for essentially this common experience ought to deepen the education of everyone. It makes the dinner table conversations more interesting. You have a fundamental correspondence of what people are exposed to, and then talks about the pedagogy, which is a novelty for Asia, the kind of pedagogy we're used to, of small class discussion, active participation, the notion of questioning not only classmates but the instructor, not just this polite recitation. So that was fundamental for Asia, but that's an integral part of the success of this curriculum. And then the confrontation of values and cultures. I mean, the other key element in this curriculum is that Asian and Western ideas will come into juxtaposition, and be Aristotle and Confucius were contemporaries, and their works will be read together in this curriculum. So anyway, there's a wonderful document which I commend to you that was just released Thursday, that I think, if the Yale 1828 reports were the seminal document about liberal education in the 19th century, the Harvard Red Book in 1945, probably the most important statement of liberal arts education in the 20th century. I think there's a really significant chance that this Yale NUS report will be the document for the 21st century. And that's not just saying we're producing a great institution in Asia, and not just saying that we're going to transform the curriculum in Asia, which I think we are. I mean, I really think there's a tremendous hunger for liberal education in Asia and for moving away from the highly specialized, almost vocational training that occurs in Asian universities toward a more flexible liberal arts education. But I think it'll spill back. I mean, you couldn't have done this frontally. What will happen is Yale people will go over and teach at Singapore, and they will bring back, well, we've already been developing the curriculum. I mean, 15 or 20 of our faculty have been very intimately involved. I think you'll start to see new, course by course, some of the innovations that we're undertaking in Singapore come back to New Haven, and who knows where that will go. I'm a real optimist. I think it's a fantastic experiment.
With this kind of document, I'm just thinking back to all the opposition and issues around this earlier on.
The opposition was really to the worries about are the political constraints in Singapore, the fact that it is not an environment as conducive to free political speech or certainly free political assembly, that would constrain the educational environment. And yes, in all honesty, it will impose some constraint on the educational environment. But it's also the case that, if you go visit these places, first of all, you see Singapore as a society in evolution. It is liberalizing significantly already. And second, that the campus, there's nothing about being on the NES campus that makes you feel like you're in some kind of society that represses free expression. People talk as openly and as honestly to one another and in the classroom and in their academic writings as they do here. So I think it's going to be fine. I think it'll work out okay.
Let's talk about Peter Salovey, your successor. And what I'm curious about, he's been your provost for what, 5 years?
4.
4 years. What have you two disagreed on in those 4 years?
That's a good question. It's not like, very little, actually. I think I'm kind of a problem solver, and I like to talk things out. So most of in various small groups, the officer team, the academic leadership group, the FAS steering executive committee, we hash things out, and we, almost inevitably come to agreement. So while we might start out in a different place about who should have this job or what should we do about this particular problem, I think we wind up, we get to the answer. And so there's no real sustained disagreements between Peter and me. I think we've been working as a team.
I'm not trying to get you to criticize him, but
I'm not going to.
Do you think there's an argument that there would have been value in having a president picked either from the outside or someone who hadn't been part of your core team?
You could make that argument. I think the search committee went around and around on that, and as they should.
And what would you have said if you were on the search committee?
Well, what I did say to the search committee is you really should look very rigorously outside. I thought that was the right thing to do, even if it did lead to the selection of an internal candidate. I think that that's really incumbent upon trustees to try to get the very best person they possibly can. And they looked at some very serious and qualified candidates.
You can tell us those names later.
Yeah. I don't even know them.
With that, you're talking about kind of some relationships that were important during your presidency. Can you think of one kind of unexpected friendship that helped shape any particular critical moments for you?
Well, I've become friends with so many of people, and I guess most of them weren't unexpected. They're natural. My team is an incredible team. The Yale Corporation Fellows have given incredible support. I suppose what's the unexpected friendship, maybe John DeStefano would qualify, because who would have...
The mayor of New Haven.
Yeah. Who would have expected that the mayor and the president of Yale would have served together for 20 years, both, and accomplished so much together. This is not always the smoothest relationship. John DeStefano is kind of a stormy personality. Michael knows well, who worked for him. But John is, he can be quite volatile. But, he is a person who cares passionately about making this a better city. And so he, in one way, is a real idealist, because he really wants to make the world better. And on the other hand, he's a very good pragmatist, and he recognizes in the end, sometimes it takes a while, that there's a lot that can be accomplished through the partnership with Yale, and that we can, as a practical matter, really move the city forward. And there have been so many successful initiatives and so many ways in which I think we have made the place better. And we are friends, and and after all this, I think we both have grown very fond of each other, even though we're incredibly different personalities.
One more expected friendship, because she picked you, she was on the search committee.
Well, then I picked her.
Is is Linda Lorimer.
Yeah.
And tell me about that friendship and that working relationship.
I can't say enough good things about Linda Lorimer. I mean, she is just the best. I mean, she was on the search committee. She interviewed me, and the first time, the first round of interviews was basically the search committee touching base with lots of different people. You know, they talked to hundreds of people. Particularly then, in 1992, that summer and fall, the place was kind of in consternation, So Bob Lynn, who's in the audience, who's chair of the search committee, where are you, Bob? Is right here. Bob Lynn and Linda Lorimer interviewed me in July of 1992. This just when they were taking soundings about the place, and I came away from that interview thinking, if I am so lucky as to get this job, I am hiring that woman. I'm bringing her back here. She had been an associate general counsel and associate provost under Bart Giamatti, and then she'd gone off at age 34 to be president of Randolph-Macon Women's College, and then was elected to the Yale Corporation as an alumni fellow. And so I actually pretty much made up my mind I want to hire this person at that very moment, and of course I followed up on it right away. I mean, I never said a word about it while the search was going on, or even confessed the idea to anybody. But please don't get the wrong idea. But after it was all done, maybe a few hours, we had actually she dropped a handkerchief before I even had a chance to say it. She told someone in Woodbridge Hall that she might be interested, and so it was clear that this was going to be great. She's been a strategic partner from the first day. She's as smart as anybody on this campus, and she has the kind of nimble mind that likes to test out possibilities and think through. If you did A or B or C, and what are the collateral consequences. Is a problem solver and a strategic thinker, and we just get a tremendous amount, and we speak basically in half sentences, but at this point, because we understand what the other one's going to finish, how the other's going to finish the sentence, but we really are able to advance each other's thinking. So there's the strategic partnership part of it that's fabulous, and then she's the best operating executive I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. I mean, I've got great people, and if you give her a task, she has an uncanny ability to mobilize people, to motivate them, and to get it done. And so basically I brought her in to handle New Haven, but I've basically given her every major university initiative since. I mean, once something gets mature, we hand it off to someone else, and then she takes over something new. And she's just a great startup entrepreneur, but also an orchestrator of large-scale activities, the international stuff now, and she organized the Tercentennial program and everything. She's just amazing, and I know you're a big fan of hers too. And I think it's been an incredible partnership, I'd say. And I've had great. On the academic side, I've had, of course, phenomenal provosts who've all gone on to lead major institutions, and they're all spectacular as well. So it's been very lucky. We've had great people to work with.
So we wanted to look
Not yet,
ahead.
not yet.
No, not yet?
A couple more questions.
Okay, what else do we want to do?
3 more questions.
You guys were perfectly coordinated until then.
First, just quickly, will the 2 new colleges be built, and when?
I'm confident they will be built. And
Will there be people living in 2 new colleges in 2019? September 2019.
I would bet on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second, what's next for you?
What's up?
Did I steal was that her question? What's next for me?
We'll see. We'll try another round.
What's next is to think about what's next. That is, I've deliberately avoided trying to plan out, what I'm going to do next in detail. Many wise people who've left jobs, leadership jobs, have said, don't, give yourself 6 months to a year before you say yes to anything. And so I've had a number of people approach me with a number of ideas, and of course one idea is to stay right here and teach economics again. But there are, I'm just going to take my time. I have a sabbatical coming. I haven't had a leave since 1986, And Jane and I are going to go out to Stanford for the fall semester, where we were both undergraduates and where our son teaches, and we have a daughter in San Francisco, and all the other two kids are in LA and Seattle, so the whole family's on the West Coast. And so it'll be nice to just have more family time and do some writing and thinking and sort of decide what I want to do when I grow up.
When you talk about the writing part of it, was it I think it was your announcement said it was going to be a book on higher education and economic policy, which sounded like a very long book.
That was probably what the Yale Daily News. That's how they got it. I don't think they'd be the same book. But, I do. There are some things I want to write. I've just published a book yesterday with the Yale Press, which is a collection of speeches and essays. In fact, the motivation for doing that book so fast was Linda Lorimer. When she read the thing in the Yale Daily News about how I was going to write a book on higher education, she says, "You're going to write a book, so I have to give us party favors in April and May when we have all these farewell events." And so I say, okay, so fine. This is volume 2 of my collected speeches, and that's out now. But there are some new things I'd like to write about. We were just talking before this about financial management of universities. I actually think I think there's some lessons that I've learned there as an economist, and that I think have general application to how to it's the boring stuff, not the policy stuff, but just how to do proper investment to maintain facilities. I mean, we have developed a system here at Yale. It's unique in the nonprofit world that does full replacement cost depreciation of our buildings, so that we now generate enough cash flow every year that we'll never, if we stick to the discipline, we will never again have the condition that I inherited. That is, that we'll have an under-maintained plant. So I actually would like to write that up. And in my new book, there's one essay on the economic crisis that's sort of based on a talk I've been giving for the last, painfully, for the last 4 years, about what we should have done, about what we should have done early on and what we still should do. And I might want to extend that into a longer, maybe not a full book, but a longer, more serious discussion. So there's a couple things I'll be working on.
Okay, so to wrap it up here, and then we are eager for all of your questions, we'll do a rapid round of 10 quick answer questions.
Okay.
So for the rapid fire questions, okay, I'll start it off. Your favorite spot on campus?
Ooh. I think probably the courtyard in Trumbull College.
The best place to think on campus?
At home on Everett Street.
Off campus.
Okay. Your favorite celebrity visitor to host a campus?
Wow, there have been so many. The most inspiring was Dasu, who was here this year. Absolutely amazing person. Maybe the most fun was Paul Simon, who sang at the Tercentennial.
A Yale experience no one should graduate without?
Seeing this art gallery.
Okay. A word for your state of mind on your first day as president?
I think joyous, but overwhelming.
A word for your state of mind on commencement next month?
I think I'll be emotional. One of the, you didn't ask me quite this question, but there's something just so magical about being up on the stage at commencement and looking out over 20,000 people at the happiest moment. When you see all these families and graduates, it really brings tears to my eyes every year. It's doing it now. It's beautiful, and I'll miss that. That was fun. That is fun.
A role model for your presidency?
Who was a role model for my presidency? Charles Eliot. I think as I've read the history of higher education, I think there's a long essay in my book about Charles Eliot.
A role model for your post-presidency?
I don't know yet, because I don't know. I would like to keep contributing in various ways to public. I mean, this is a public service job, the way I see it, and I think at some level I want to be an active contributor into life. And while I don't necessarily share the politics of these people, the people like George Shultz and Henry Kissinger who've remained active and valuable contributors to the discussion of public issues, well along into their late years of life, are very inspiring to me.
Okay. Two more. What would rank as your most embarrassing moment as president?
Embarrassing. I mean, I know where I messed up the most, but gee, that's a hard one. I can't really come up with that one. I'll take a pass. Next one.
Can we pause for a second? You said you knew where you messed up the most.
We'll take that instead.
Yeah. Well, that was worse than embarrassing. That was just
So where did you mess up the most?
The whole Lee Bass gift fiasco in year 2, where I just had misread. I just had misread the situation and didn't realize how disaffected the donor was becoming with the sort of lack of action on implementing the program that he had wanted to implement, and that led. I guess it was your year as editor, or was it? No, it was
it was the year after.
Yeah, a year after.
Yeah.
And so it became it worked its way to an end game in which he made an unreasonable demand on us, which was that he get to approve the appointment of professors to his program, which actually made it easy for me to say, here's your check back, which made me a hero to the New York Times and a villain to the Wall Street Journal. It was an interesting, but I really screwed up there. It was not, I didn't deserve the accolades. It's easy to say no to a donor. You can't appoint a professor. It's obvious they can't appoint a professor. It's just not consistent with our values. But he didn't have to get to that point, and I let things deteriorate to that point. So it was that wasn't a short answer, but yeah.
And the proudest moment of your presidency?
Probably when Jane won the teaching prize.
So we'll open to your questions, and we have a good amount of time for your questions. There are microphones that you should wait for because we are being video recorded.
Thank you. I have another question about your successor. You've touched on the importance of understanding people, and of course your successor is a psychologist. How would you compare your temperament and your leadership style to Professor Salovey's temperament and style?
We both actually are, I think, good listeners and kind of empathetic people that relate well to others and try to penetrate what others are saying to really get at what they're thinking. I mean, I actually think the two disciplines that are most important to a leader are economics and psychology, and I think Peter really does have those kinds of skills, and that's clearly the biggest similarity. The differences are more, are not so much temperamental as just training. I mean, it's not that he's not a clear or rigorous thinker. He is, but I'm an economist. I mean, I really have a penchant for breaking problems down, organizing them very logically, and reasoning my way to the answer. And I think Peter's a little more intuitive, and not that he doesn't think things through. He does, but I think there's some differences in our attributes that way. But people are different.
Nationally, I think there's a widespread perception that university educations are becoming unaffordable for many people and for society as a whole as the price inflates much more rapidly than the cost of living. How long do you think this can go on, and what might slow or stop or even reverse that pattern?
There's a lot of misunderstanding of this problem. First of all, the growth in what it costs an individual to send, what it costs a family to send a child to college, has been most dramatic in the public institutions, at least twice the rate of inflation as in the private schools. And why is that? That's because of the cutbacks in state funding. And why is that? That's because the cost of health care. So what you see in state budgets is a massive shift from expenditure on education to expenditure on health care. And so, you know, interestingly, if you want to control the cost of public education, let's fix the health care problem. I mean, nobody says that, but that's my view. Now, with respect to the private institutions, you really have two separate issues. When you talk about the highly selected, well-endowed institutions, our price to the people who are on financial aid, which is the majority, has been falling. The average price paid for a Yale education has gone down 1.1% per year over my tenure, adjusted for inflation, because our financial aid program has grown faster than tuition. So today, you know, I mean, obviously the low end, the median U.S. income pays nothing for Yale education. That's not well understood in the general public. It's hard to get that message out. But the same statement I just made would be true of Harvard and Princeton and Stanford and most of the Ivy League peers and the Emerson Williams of the world too. But then there's a whole chunk of and of course it's not true for the full paying students those families who can afford it, they've seen increases on the order of inflation plus 2% a year or so over the 20 years. And there are lots and lots of private institutions that don't have the resources to do the kind of financial aid programs that the top ones do. So it's a little bit more complicated picture. I think that the technology change, these changes in technology do afford some hope for a solution. But the solution could take radical forms like a significant reduction in the number of residential institutions, physical universities, and we could see a lot of exit from the existing set of colleges and universities, and their replacement by large scale online enterprises that actually over time start giving degrees and being substitutes.
We'll take one or two more, maybe in the back.
Following up on that a little bit, there was a recent column by David Leonhardt, I think it was by Leonhardt, might have been by Eduardo Porter, about Hawksby's study that shows that a lot of the poor students, that is poor financially, don't have the knowledge that you just expressed, and the sort of the part below it was that if in fact they got this knowledge and got in, then the financial aid budgets would go up. So, I mean, is Yale doing anything to try to recruit students of lower economic means, beyond, what they've been doing in the past? Because from my perspective, I teach at a public institution. The Ivy Leagues have been, trying to get their acceptance rate down by going and recruiting lots of people, probably who are affluent, who they know for sure won't get in. So you have all these college nights and college pressure and all the mailings, and effectively you get a lot of people that you're not going to take. So you can say, well, we have an 8% acceptance rate. But from the reading this study, it looks like if you push down, you'd find a lot of people who are not affluent who would, in fact, probably be accepted, but would, in fact, be a higher burden on the financial aid budget. So I'm wondering if Yale's thought about that at all.
Well, we think about it all the time, and we actually have made intensified efforts to get the word out about our financial aid programs, and we try to reach those students it's true because so many of the kind of students, this is a very good paper by Carolyn Hawksby and Chris Avery, by the way, and I think it's really worth reading and thinking about. But the idea is that there are lots of public school kids out there not in the known to be excellent public schools, but in just all over America, who are top of their class, who are real outliers for their communities, who when they ask their college counselors, where should I go, they say the state university. They don't even think about going to the highly selective institutions. And I think that is a problem, and we are doing as much as we can. Well, I wouldn't say that. We've been doing quite a bit to try to get to those kids, but mainly through email and that kind of contact, as opposed to sending admissions officers. The problem with sending admissions officers to a rural school in Kansas that might produce a Yale quality student once every 5 or 10 years is that it may not be a very efficient use of time, so of the admissions officers. So it's a trade-off. It would be great. I think the Hawksby-Avery paper will stimulate a lot of discussion among the Ivies and the other selective liberal arts colleges about maybe pooling resources for recruiting, and rather than all going out by ourselves, but sort of spreading ourselves to just make it understood that this network is available to you. I think that would be a great thing. It would be a great consequence of their research, which is compelling. I think it's a shame that there are so many bright kids that don't know what they could get at a place like this.
Let's take one more question. Vivian.
So speaking of David Leonhardt, it's become legendary here at the Yale Daily News, the story of how we broke the news that you were going to be appointed president. And I've always wanted to ask what was going through your mind as this reporter accosted you on the streets of New Haven. And what did you think when it was in the paper the next day?
I don't think I said anything that would have given them a reason to think that they could run that story, actually. But Josh was the one who actually confronted me, right? And
It's Josh.
Yeah.
Josh is in the back.
so how do you remember it, Josh? What did I say?
Bring a mic.
What did I say that tipped it off?
I think there was a legendary part of this story where a member of our board, David Leonhardt, walked in the Hall of Graduate Studies and congratulated your assistant on your being appointed. And she said, thanks, isn't it great news?
Now you didn't print that. You've been trying to pin it on, for 20 years, Josh, you've been trying to pin it on me as though I could. So Candy Bryce was the one, huh? Wow. I had no idea. Well, that's okay. You guys, is that good journalistic ethics to conceal your sources now?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. A lot of fun.
Let's stay 1 minute. What's next? We're going to have an update on the news from the current editor and the current publisher, and then we'll have our political discussion with David Gergen and a whole great group of reporters.
Okay, thank you. That was fun. Thank you all.
Congratulations.